first question we're going to be covering today is why did the Soviets and US take capture as many German scientists as they could after World War II? Well,
After World War II, the US and the Soviets captured as many scientists as they could because they didn't want the Germans' advanced technology to get them by surprise. Allies like the Soviet Union were doing the same thing as well. If the Soviets were going to press their former enemies into service, American military officials didn't want to be left behind. So the US government came up with a plan to bring 88 Nazi scientists captured during the fall of the Nazi Germany back to America. The American government didn't want to wait to be hit by the advanced technology, so many teams of commandos and agents were sent ahead of the front lines and deep into Germany to hunt for both the weapons and the scientists and engineers who'd created them.
the second question we're going to be covering today is why did they want rocket technology and what was it used for?
Rocket technology was a series of internal and external rudder and the guidance system which controlled the flight of the rocket fueled powered missile so that it could hit a particular city from a distance of over 200 miles. Each country wanted to acquire the technology for themselves. Germany's rocket was first launched successfully toward Western Europe on September 8, 1944. The V 2 was the world's first ballistic missile. More than 3,000 V2s produced in an underground factory called the Mittelwerk were rained on Europe in the months before Germany's surrender.
The third question we're going to be covering today is how and who was responsible for putting the first satellite into orbit.
On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite, which was about the size of a beach ball and weighed 183.9 pounds. It took about 98 minutes to orbit the Earth on its elliptical path. The JPL community was surprised that Soviets could have both a successful launch vehicle and the electronic technology to operate the satellite. July 1957 marked the beginning of the International Geophysical Year, where scientists around the world planned to jointly observe various scientific phenomena. The United States needed an immediate response. The first attempt, the Naval Research Lab's Vanguard project, failed. The rocket exploded in full view of the press, embarrassing the nation. History changed as a result. While the Sputnik launch was a single event, it marked the start of the space age and the United States USSR space race.
Question 4. What program did US President John F. Kennedy launch in 1961? In 1961, the President John F. Kennedy announced to Congress his goal of sending an American to the moon by the end of the decade. He asked for financial support of an accelerated space program. He made the task a national priority and a mission in which all Americans would share. On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union had become the first country to send a man into space with the successful mission of the Yuri Gagarin and the spacecraft Vostok 1. On May 5, American Alan Shepard flew into space but did not orbit the Earth as the Russian cosmonaut had. At that time, the US and the Soviet Union were already locked in an arms race. Not to be outdone by America's Cold War rivals, President Kennedy pledged in 1961 to support an American space program that would eventually dwarf the Soviet program in technological achievements and investment. Question 5. What success did it have by 1969? Kennedy's vision did not become a reality until 6 years after he was assassinated. On July 20, 1969, the whole world watched Apollo 11 Commander Neil Armstrong become the first human to walk on the moon. Apollo 11 was a spaceflight that landed the first two people on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Commander Neil Armstrong and Lunar Module pilot Buzz Aldrin, both American, landed the Apollo Lunar Module Eagle on July 20, 1969. Armstrong became the first person to step onto the lunar surface 6 hours later on July 21. Aldrin joined him 19 minutes later. They spent about 2¼ hours together outside the spacecraft and collected 47.5 pounds of lunar material to bring back to Earth. Command Module pilot Michael Collins flew the Command Module Columbia alone in lunar orbit while they were on the moon's surface. Armstrong and Aldrin spent 21.5 hours on the lunar surface before rejoining Columbia in lunar orbit.